A Boeing 727 dropped out of the turbulent night sky, fighting heavy rain and harsh winds to land safely on the tarmac in Reno, Nevada. The moment the wheels stopped, heavily armed FBI agents swarmed the runway. They breached the aircraft doors, ready to apprehend the man who had hijacked the flight just hours earlier. When they cleared the cabin, they found only the flight crew. The man calling himself Dan Cooper, along with the $200,000 he had demanded in ransom, was gone. Today, more than half a century later, this event stands entirely alone. It is the only unsolved hijacking of a commercial airliner in American history.
November 24, 1971. On the day before Thanksgiving, American airports were filled with families and holiday travelers. This crowded, busy environment provided the ideal cover for a man looking to blend in and disappear. This is a Boeing 727, the aircraft used for Northwest Orient Flight 305. It was a short, routine commute scheduled to fly from Portland to Seattle in under an hour. Before this brief flight reached its destination, a quiet passenger would carry out the only unsolved commercial airplane hijacking in the history of the FBI. He left no paper trail for investigators to follow. He paid cash for a one-way ticket under the name Dan Cooper and arrived dressed in a standard dark business suit with a black tie and a pearl clip. Inside the cabin, he took seat 18C. He ordered a bourbon and soda and lit a cigarette, fitting the exact profile of a typical mid-century businessman traveling for work. Cooper relied on his own anonymity to gain the upper hand. By appearing completely ordinary, he moved through the airport and boarded the plane without drawing a second look, ensuring the aircraft was sealed and in the air before he revealed his intentions. A few minutes into the flight, Cooper handed a folded note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She initially ignored it, assuming it was a passenger's attempt to flirt, and dropped it into her purse. Cooper leaned toward her and spoke in a calm, steady voice. He spoke politely and kept his voice controlled, maintaining the same quiet demeanor he had when he first boarded the plane. By targeting a single crew member with this isolated threat, Cooper secured the cockpit without alerting the rest of the cabin. This prevented a general panic among the passengers that could have forced a premature end to his plan. He issued a specific set of demands: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting for the aircraft in Seattle. On the ground, government officials were trapped. They could either risk a shootout with a potential bomber in a crowded airport or meet the hijackers' demands to save the passengers. While gathering the cash, the FBI photographed the serial numbers of every $20 bill. They were building a record that would allow them to track the money the moment it was spent. As law enforcement scrambled below, the passengers remained in the dark. Most spent the flight reading newspapers or looking out the window, completely unaware they were part of a hijacking. This image shows the Seattle airport tarmac at night. After the plane landed, Cooper remained on board, carefully inspecting the ransom money and the parachutes, while law enforcement watched from a distance. Once he was satisfied with the items, Cooper released all the passengers and most of the cabin crew. He kept only the pilots, the flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant on the aircraft. This exchange removed the primary reason for the FBI to storm the plane. Without dozens of innocent lives at stake, the authorities lost their tactical justification for a rescue mission, while Cooper kept the staff required to fly the aircraft to his next destination. Cooper ordered the crew back into the sky, demanding a flight path toward Mexico City. They flew south into a cold, dark storm over the forests of the Pacific Northwest. Though fighter jets followed the Boeing 727, they kept a wide distance to avoid provoking Cooper, while the aircraft was buffeted by heavy winds and rain. The crew remained locked in the cockpit, unable to see into the cabin. They could only listen to the heavy mechanical thuds and shifting air pressure echoing from the back of the plane. Alone in the cabin, Cooper strapped on a parachute and secured the bag containing the $200,000 to his person. Cooper exploited a design feature of the Boeing 727. It was one of the few airliners with aft air stairs that could be lowered during flight. When a warning light flashed, the crew knew they were deployed. Cooper stepped out, disappearing into the freezing night. He landed somewhere in this vast, unforgiving landscape. Decades of searches through the dense forests and rivers of the Northwest failed to turn up a body or a definitive trace of his path.
By utilizing a simple disguise and exploiting a unique aircraft feature, Dan Cooper committed a crime that left no physical trail. He purchased a ticket, jumped into a storm, and completely vanished, leaving behind only a legacy of unanswered questions. His disappearance relied on a calculated exploitation of aviation mechanics, extreme weather, and hostile geography to execute an exit that appeared impossible. While still on the ground in Seattle, his demands to the flight crew were strangely precise. He ordered the pilots to fly toward Mexico under rigid operational constraints. On this 727 schematic, you see his exact parameters: altitude at 10,000 feet and landing gear lowered as drag, reducing airspeed. At this low speed and altitude, the cabin didn't need pressurization. This allowed the unique rear air stair to safely lower into the slipstream. Around 8 p.m., a warning light flashed inside the cockpit, indicating that the staircase was fully open. Moments later, the pilots felt a sudden, distinct upward pitch in the aircraft as a heavy weight at the rear detached. This intimate knowledge of the 727's aerodynamic limits transformed a routine passenger jet into a customized mid-air jump platform. Stepping off that staircase meant plunging into a violent Pacific Northwest storm. Freezing temperatures, chaotic wind currents, and blinding rain immediately battered him. Beneath him lay the drop zone, thousands of square miles of dense, untamed Washington state wilderness. The storm system neutralized the immediate law enforcement response. Radar could not track a falling human body through the weather clutter, and the pitch-black clouds meant nobody on the ground could visually spot a parachute. When the weather finally broke, the ground search faced an impossible task. Helicopters scanning from above could not see through the thick evergreen canopy, and search teams on foot struggled to cover the rugged terrain. The Pacific Northwest environment acted as a natural shield, making a standard law enforcement manhunt physically impossible. Back on the plane, investigators were left with almost nothing. They collected a black clip-on tie and a few cigarette butts and compiled this composite sketch. The sunglasses obscure his eyes, leaving a face that could belong to almost anyone. The trail evaporated until 1980, when an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging in the sand along the banks of the Columbia River. Instead of finding shells, he pulled out decaying bundles of cash. Serial numbers confirmed this was nearly $6,000 of the ransom money. The discovery split investigators down the middle. One theory suggests the river slowly washed these bills downstream from a corpse. Another argues a surviving Cooper buried a portion of his loot to hide his tracks. Finding the cash proved he made it to the ground, but it permanently scrambled the timeline. Without a body, a parachute, or the rest of the money, the river find created a paradox, destroying any chance of proving if he lived or died. Over the following decades, the FBI scrutinized thousands of suspects. They analyzed former paratroopers, professional criminals, and ordinary businessmen, but every promising lead eventually collapsed. In 2016, after 45 years of dead ends, the FBI officially closed the active investigation. The Bureau closed the case because they had run out of actionable leads, leaving the central mystery unsolved. Depending on who you ask, he is either a brilliant criminal who successfully started a new life, or a foolish amateur who died on impact. This permanent state of uncertainty allows him to exist as both a mastermind and a ghost in the American imagination. The legend of Dan Cooper endures because he committed a crime that ended precisely where nature took over, ensuring the truth would remain permanently lost in the woods.